the soul of Bharatavarsha had more or less remained intact. In fact, Hindus never rested, Hindus never stopped resisting this alien oppressive rule. But the freedom struggle, apart from securing political freedom, was also a two-pronged struggle for a far more profound nature. This was a struggle to stop the corrosion of the cultural soul of India and also to simultaneously recover the best elements of our culture. This was not nationalism in theory. It wasn't a topic of vacuous and brainless TV debates. This was something that was lived out on the theatre of an ancient civilization's destiny. It is also a true story which has never been told in full till date. It is a story that moved a towering American scholar like Will Durant. Will Durant was so deeply moved by it that when he visited India for collecting material for doing research as part of his monumental volumes titled Story of Civilization, Durant decided to stay back in India. He decided to take a break from the work on the story of civilization, and as he stayed in India, he decided to learn more about this country, its civilization, its history, and its society. And what he discovered here shocked and depressed him. It led him to write another classic. The name of the book is The Case for India. And I will read out a couple of portions from that lovely book. Quote, "I saw such things in India as made me feel that study and writing were frivolous things in the presence of 1/5 of the human race suffering poverty and oppression bitterer than any to be found elsewhere on the earth. The more I read, the more I was filled with astonishment and indignation at the deliberate bleeding of India by England throughout 150 years. I began to feel that I had come upon the greatest crime in all history. The British conquest of India was a destruction of a high civilization by a trading company utterly without scruple or principle, careless of art and greedy of gain, overrunning with fire and sword a country temporarily disordered and helpless. The present plunder has now gone beyond bearing. Year by year, it is destroying one of the greatest and gentlest peoples of history." Close quote. You know what is a greater tragedy? The greater tragedy is the fact that the case for India, Will Durant's book, has not been prescribed as a textbook, or even portions of the book have not been prescribed in our mainstream curriculum even 70 plus years after our nominal liberation from British colonial rule, and this alone should make us introspect deeper on the true meaning of freedom and independence. In fact, from another perspective, the period of our freedom struggle can also be called truly the era of the modern Indian Renaissance, and this was a phrase that the iconic history scholar Ramesh Chandra Majumdar uses repeatedly in some of his books. And then there is a familiar and a stale argument that it was the British who for the first time united India politically, until which time India was a disjointed mass of kingdoms which were continuously warring with each other. If that is the case, how did the people of these same warring regions, of these hostile kingdoms, how did they all come together to fight the same colonial British? The answer to this question, once again, lies in the unique phenomenon called Indian nationalism. It is a nationalism of a wholly different kind, and one of its definitions, one of its beautiful definitions, is given by a titan of Indian history, Professor S. Shrikanta Shastri, and I'll quote, "The culture of India, like the country itself, is indivisible and timeless, just like its indivisible geography that stretches from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Kashi Vishveshwara to Rameshwara, from Bindu Madhava to Setu Madhava. Indian culture too represents this indivisible continuum from the rishis of the Vedas all the way up to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa." This, I think, is one of the purest definitions of Indian nationalism. In other words, Indian nationalism is also the expression of the timeless cultural unity of Bharatavarsha, and this cultural university was recognized as the chief obstacle by the British, who introduced a soulless and deracinating education system which was precisely aimed at destroying this spiritual culture and the cultural unity of Bharatavarsha. And this is precisely where an exhaustive study of the modern Indian Renaissance becomes so invaluable. A large number of truly extraordinary Indians of that period, when they saw what the British were doing with their so-called English education system, these extraordinary Indians during the modern Indian Renaissance period, they hit back against this British education with surgical precision. And you know how they did that? They did that by tapping into precisely this cultural and civilizational unity of Bharatavarsha. They used our ancient symbolism, they used our deities, they used our inspirational messages of the rishis and the sadhus. They re-emphasized and repurposed our ideals and values, and they shaped and they sculpted a deeper and a more elevated brand of freedom struggle. For example, even today, a foreign scholar of Indology, a foreigner, a scholar of Indian culture, her name is Diana Eck, and she has astutely realized this cultural unity of India when she titled her book, India, a Sacred Geography. You see, she could have used any other title, but she chose to use this very pithy, very straightforward, but a title that encompasses all of Indian traditions. When she says India, a sacred geography. And that is something that today's Hindus should learn how to do. Anyway, long story short, Indian nationalism cannot be separated from Hindu culture and civilization. But yet, tragically, it appears that once we gained independence, we not only abandoned nationalism, but we transformed the word into an obscenity, into a cuss word. As numerous scholars and thinkers over several decades have pointed out, and I'm only borrowing from them, the reason why nationalism has become a cuss word is that we expelled our colonizer from our physical geography, but we retained the mental and psychological chains of our colonizers. And this is a weakness of national spirit which we have sadly still been unable to shake off, although much improvement has been made on that front. And I'll read out one quote to illustrate this mental colonization. Quote, "Honorable members, I ask you members to stand in your places to pay tribute of respect to Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who by his grim determination and steadfast devotion was able to carve out and found Pakistan, and whose passing away at this moment is an irreparable loss to all." Close quote. Guess who said this? This was the Honorable First President of Independent India, Dr. Babu Rajendra Prasad, This was his address to the Constituent Assembly of India on Thursday, November 4th, 1948. If his statement in the Constituent Assembly of India, if this is not a weakness of spirit, I don't know what else is. It is the same weakness of spirit that characterized the Congress party beginning with Nawab Nehru and downwards. It is the same weakness of spirit that also made Nawab Nehru shed tears on the death of a genocidal communist maniac, Stalin. Nawab Nehru, as we all know, was an incurable addict of Soviet Russia. He was deeply enamored by Stalin, and he used to address Stalin not by his full name, but he used to address him as Marshal Stalin. And this man, Nawab Nehru, when Stalin died, he stood up in the Indian Parliament and gave a call for adjourning the Indian Parliament for 2 days.